Hello, you are most welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Real Impartation Moment on Tuesday Night Anatomy with Daniel Okwan. Today's section, we want to quickly look at muscles of the anterior compartment of the forearm. We are through with muscles of the arm. Yes, we looked at the muscles of the anterior compartment of the arm and that of the posterior compartment. So you can visit those videos if you've not watched them already. So today we are interested in looking at muscles of the forearm, but beginning with muscles of the anterior compartment of the forearm. And they are those muscles, we call them flexors of the forearm. And you get to know that generally, yes, these muscles will be supplied, but of course, the median nerve, the eye of the forearm. But of course, the medial half of what we call flexor Digitorum Profundus, as well as, of course, Flexor CARPI or Nares will be supplied, but of course, the ulnar nerve. And so, without much ado, let's quickly run through this. So, we begin with now, one thing that we have to know about these flexors is that, yes, flexors will generally have a common origin. And that common origin is what we call the medial epicondyle. Medial epicondyle, generally, that's where they are going to come from. But especially the superficial flexors, yes, will be coming from medial epicondyle. But this muscle that we find over here is what we call the Pronator Teres. Pronator Teres. Yes, it's one of those muscles which will be very important in pronation of the forearm. But that one, yes, is having two heads. Its humeral head or its superficial head is actually coming from what we call medial supracondylar ridge, not entirely coming from the medial epicondyle. Now, usually, this medial epicondyle, if you frequently use it, because you are calling it the common flexor origin, then it will lead to, if you are using your flexors a lot, then it may lead to inflammation of it. And that's what we call medial epicondylitis. And that's what you can also call the golfer's elbow. And for lateral epicondyle, yes, if you continuously use it and it inflames, that is lateral epicondylitis. And that one is what you call tennis elbow. We look at that when we look at the posterior compartment of the forearm. But this Pronator Teres is not coming from what we call medial epicondyle, but it's coming from medial supracondylar ridge. That's Pronator Teres, its superficial head or its humeral head. Then it's having another head which is taking origin from what we call the coronoid process of what we call the ulna, anterior aspect of the coronoid process of the ulna, and that is what we call, the ulnar head or the deep head. Now, one thing I have to know is that passing between the superficial head or the humeral head and the ulnar head is going to be what we call the median nerve. So the median nerve will be somewhere, it will pass through with it. So this is the muscle that the median nerve will pierce through. So it's piercing through, yes, between or passing through between, of course, the superficial head, and that is, of course, the humeral head, and then, of course, the ulnar head. So when we get these heads, yes, they will form a common belly, and of course will insert on what we call the anterior aspect of the middle shaft of what we call the radius. Okay, it inserts around that area, radius. And so this is what we call the Pronator Teres muscle. So we can see that it's not only coming from the humerus but also coming from the ulna, and at the end they inserting on what we call the radius. So I told you that because median nerve will of course be running through it, it will also give some branches to supply this Pronator Teres muscle. And as I said, it's very important as far as pronation of the forearm is concerned. Say that, yes, entirely the forearm together with the palm, yes, will face downwards. Anterior, the palm will face inferiorly. So that's what we see, Pronator Teres muscle. Now the next muscle that we find, okay, so in the flexor compartment of the forearm or in the anterior compartment of the forearm, yes, we are going to see Pronator Teres is one of those muscles. Then the next muscle that we are going to see, which you find in the superficial group, just like the Pronator Teres, is what we call Flexor CARPI or Nares. Now, Flexor CARPI or Nares is also going to have two heads, yes. One head, which is the humeral head, no problem, is coming from the common, flexor origin, and that is what we call the medial epicondyle. Okay, common flexor origin, that's the medial epicondyle. Then, of course, it will also have an ulnar head. And that ulnar head, is coming from, the medial margin of the olecranon. Okay, so medial margin of the olecranon, yes, as well as, the upper two thirds of the posterior border of the ulna. So, yes, that's the medial margin of the olecranon. Then that's the upper two thirds okay, of the posterior border of the ulna. So this represents, you know, the, you know, origins of these hairs of the flexor carpi ulnaris. So there we are. So as I said, yes, it's going to come from, yes, it's having two hairs, the ulnar head from medial epicondyle, then of course from the olecranon, okay, you know, or let me say, yes, it's also going to come from what we call the, you know, posterior border of the shaft of the ulna, okay, posterior border of the shaft of the ulna. So that is what we call the ulnar head, okay. So these two hairs, yes, will be pierced by what we call the ulnar nerve, will be pierced by the ulnar nerve. Now I told you that, yes, if you take that of the, you know, the Pronator Teres, yes, it two hairs will be pierced or will give the passage for what we call the median nerve. Now, giving passage to one of the long nerves, being the musician nerve, is what we call the two hairs of flexor carpi ulnaris. Okay, so that is what we find over here, and that one, yes, eventually will go and then insert onto, essentially, it's going to insert onto what we call the base of the fifth metacarpal. But at the end of the day, before it goes and insert there, it will insert in what we call the hook of hamate, and then developing within the tendon of flexor carpi ulnaris will be the pisiform bone. So by way of insertion, yes, you add the pisiform, the hook of hamate, and then more importantly, the base of the fifth metacarpal, And because of where it is inserting, yes, it's going to be upon contraction, it will cause, of course, palmar flexion. Not only palmar flexion will be, essential over here, but, well, because of where it's inserting, the base of the fifth metacarpal, then it will be very important in what we call ulnar deviation of the wrist. So that is what we call flexor carpi ulnaris, another superficial muscle, okay, having two hairs. Then the next muscle that we look at, yes, also coming from the common flexor origin, that is the medial epicondyle. Yes, this is what we call Palmaris longus. So just moving, yes, lateral to what we call flexor carpi ulnaris, I'm going to get Palmaris longus, also one of the superficial muscles. Now this muscle beyond, after crossing this band, okay, over here, which we call a flexor retinaculum, which of course the tendons in the forearm, okay, will have to run, tendons in the anterior compartment of the forearm will have to run deep to it. Okay, this is the flexor retinaculum. Beyond that, it's pressed to become this, fascia or aponeurosis, which is going to protect the neurovascular structures in the hand, and that is what we call palmar aponeurosis. So palmar aponeurosis is modification of the tendon of palmaris longus beyond the flexor retinaculum. So by way of attachment of palmaris longus, then we will include the flexor retinaculum, as well as that kind of palmar aponeurosis we are talking about. So it means that, yes, upon contraction of this palmaris longus muscle, then it will cause that kind of flexion at this wrist joint. Okay, it will cause palmar flexion. So that is what we have to know. Palmar aponeurosis. Palmaris longus. So just like, yes, it will also be supplied by, of course, the median nerve. But of course, we know that, yes, giving passage to the ulnar nerve is going to be the the flexor carpi ulnaris, and therefore that one will be supplied by, of course, the ulnar nerve. So this one is supplied by median nerve. Okay, so that is that one. Then if I go even lateral to what we call the palmaris longus, then I'm going to get what we call flexor carpi radialis. Now we saw that there was the from medial to lateral. Yes, we saw the superficial group. We had what we call flexor carpi ulnaris, which inserted onto what we call the hook of hamate, as well as, of course, the base of the fifth metacarpal, and of course developing within the tendon will be the pisiform. Okay, then we said that lateral to this one will be the palmaris longus, which of course was spread in the forearm beyond the flexor retinaculum to form what we call the palmar aponeurosis. Now this time around, taking origin from this same common flexor origin, that's the medial epicondyle. Yes, this time around inserting onto the base of what we call the second and third. Now this schematic diagram is not showing it clearly, but it's going to insert onto the base of the second as well as the third metacarpals. And that is why I'm interested in telling you where they are going to insert, because the name flexor carpi radialis may give you some idea. Yes, it's a flexor because, yes, it's found in the anterior compartment, going to help in palmar flexion, so no problem, it's a flexor. It is called CARPI, yes, not because it's going to insert on any carpal bone. It is, going to a metacarpal bone. That's what I'm interested in telling you. It's going to the base of the second as well as the third metacarpal. And then radialis, because it's more closer to the radius bone. Yes, because this flexor carpi ulnaris is more closer to the ulnar bone. It has no attachment to the radius, neither does it have attachment to the ulnar. So the name, the nomenclature, you have to really understand it. Okay, so this is flexor carpi radialis muscle. So of course flexor carpi radialis muscle will be very important in palmar flexion. But not only that, because of where it's inserted, the base of course the second and third metacarpals more closer to the radial bone, then it's very important as far as radial deviation of the wrist is concerned. Radial deviation of the wrist is concerned. So that is what we have to know. Flexor carpi radialis. It's not having two heads, unlike the flexor carpi ulnaris and the Pronator Teres that we've seen. It's having a single head. This one is also supplied by, of course, the median nerve. Then if you go to now, so these muscles that I've mentioned to you, these four muscles, Pronator Teres, flexor carpi ulnaris, yes, Palmaris longus, and of course flexor carpi radialis, they are muscles that will form the superficial group in the anterior compartment of the forearm. Now if I cut and reflect what we call the superficial group of muscles, especially Palmaris longus, then deep to them, okay, I'm going to have the single intermediate muscle, and that is what we call flexor Digitorum superficialis. Now this flexor Digitorum superficialis, yes, is coming from, of course, the common flexor origin, as well as from what we call the anterior oblique line. So one thing that you have to know is that, yes, from the common flexor origin, that's the medial epicondyle, yes, as well as the anterior oblique line. If you talk about anterior oblique line, yes, it's on the radius. Okay, so by some portion, yes, some fibers will be coming from, of course, the coronoid process of the ulna, but importantly, anterior oblique line. So that at the end of the day, we get this kind of U-shaped opening over here, so that neurovascular structures will actually run through it. Flexor Digitorum superficialis. Okay, where of course the radial nerve will be running through it. Okay, so that is flexor Digitorum superficialis. Now this one, yes, at the end of the day, is distally a tendon was split into four. So you can see that four tendons are emerging from here, 1, 2, 3, and 4 to the medial four digits, excluding the thumb. So the thumb is not part of it, the medial four digits. But at the end of the day, it's going to insert onto the base. Now these are the metacarpals. Okay, the palm, these are the carpal bones, these are the metacarpals, the palm bones, and then the bones in the digit. Each digit will have 3 phalanges except the thumb. So the 3 phalanges, we are interested in the middle phalanges. Okay, the middle phalanges of these medial 4 digits, they are bases. Now we have a proximal base, intermediate shaft, and distal head. So is there proximal bases where these tendons, okay, before they will insert there, yes, the middle phalanges over there, before they insert over there, they will split. Okay, as you can see, they have this fork tendon to insert onto the base of what we call the middle phalanges of these medial 4 digits. So that at the end of the day, what they are doing is that, yes, running deep to them. Can you see something passing through this split tendon? Okay, there's another tendon running deep to it, and that will be the deeper muscle where is flexor digitorum profundus. So I'll show you that one, because that one will have to go and insert onto the base of what we call the distal phalanges of these medial 4 digits. Okay, so that is what we call flexor Digitorum superficialis. So as the name suggests, yes, it's going to be very important as far as flexion of these digits at the proximal interphalangeal joint. Remember, proximal interphalangeal joint, because it's not going to insert on the distal aspect. We know that, yes, the distal one will be distal flexion at the distal interphalangeal joint will be by what we call the flexor digitorum profundus, because that one will have to go and insert on the base of what we call the distal phalanges. So flexion at the proximal interphalangeal joint is by the kind case of contraction of flexor digitorum superficialis muscle. Okay, so that's one thing that we have to know. Yes, it also produce some kind of weak flexion so by way of some palmar flexion at what we call the wrist joint. But importantly is what we call flexion at the proximal interphalangeal joint. That's the only intermediate muscle, also supplied by, of course, the median nerve. Then we go to, if I cut and reflect, okay, the flexor digitorum, superficialis, then taking attachment from a bit distal position. Now remember, because as we go more deeper, then the origin will be coming from a distal portion. Okay, flexor digitorum superficialis originated from medial epicondyle, but this muscle, which is flexor digitorum profundus means deep, will be taking origin, can you see that, from what we call the proximal 3/4 of the ulna. Okay, proximal 3/4 of the ulna, yes, even together with, of course, there will be an interosseous membrane. So the interosseous membrane between these bones, okay, will also be taking origin from this area. But the end of the day, yes, running deep to what we call flexor digitorum superficialis, its tendon, yes, will also split, okay, into 4, so that you get 4 tendons going toward the medial 4 digits, but actually going all the way to the base of the distal phalanges of these medial 4 digits. Okay, so that's the flexor digitorum, profundus. Now, this flexor digitorum profundus is a hybrid muscle. Why? Because its medial half will be supplied by, of course, the ulnar nerve, and its lateral half will be supplied by, of course, the median, nerve. So that is what you have to know about this flexor digitorum profundus, because it's going to, of course, the distal phalanges. Then it will be very important as far as flexion at the distal interphalangeal joint will be concerned. The medial 4, flexion of the medial 4, digit at the distal interphalangeal joint. Then there's another deep muscle. Now this time around, this deep muscle is taking origin from what we call the distal aspect, okay, of the anterior surface of the the radius. Okay, that's also a deep muscle. So it's going to take attachment from a bit lower level, not coming from the common flexor origin. Okay, so a bit lower level. Okay, that is what we call flexor pollicis, longus. That one is also deep. Okay, so adjacent where we saw flexor digitorum profundus, okay, to the radial side, okay, taking attachment from the radial aspect, the lower aspect of the anterior shaft of the, what you call it, the radius, then it's going to be by what you call flexor pollicis longus. Now, the word pollex has to do with the thumb. So at the end of the day, it's going all the way to insert on the base of the distal phalanx of what you call the thumb. The base of the distal phalanx of the thumb. And that is why it will be very important as far as, flexion of the thumb will be concerned. Flexion of the thumb will be concerned. Okay, so flexor pollicis longus. So you get to know that there will be flexor pollicis brevis in the one of the intrinsic muscles of the hand. Okay, so you can visit that kind of video that I've done for you. Okay, so that is the flexor pollicis longus, also supplied by, of course, the median nerve. Okay, so that is what you have to know. Now, the deepest muscle in the anterior compartment of the arm. Okay, so we've seen that, yes, by way of superficial muscles, we are going to have 4: Pronator Teres, Flexor CARPI ulnaris, yes, Palmaris longus, and of course Flexor CARPI radialis. Then the intermediate muscle, that was a single muscle, that's Flexor digitorum superficialis. Then for the deep muscles, yes, we've seen, Flexor digitorum profundus. We've seen also, yes, Flexor pollicis longus. Then, of course, the next deep muscle that we see is what we call, Pronator quadratus. So that is the deepest muscle. Okay, Pronator quadratus is the deepest muscle, this quadrangular shaped muscle. Now, the more deep you are, the more distal you take origin. So taking origin, yes, from what we call, the ulnar aspect, okay, from what we call the anterior aspect of the distal aspect of the ulna, or I can say the lower 1/4 anterior surface of the ulna, yes, coming to insert on what we call the lower 1/4 or the distalmost aspect of the radius is what we call the pronator quadratus. Quadratus because having this quadrangular shaped, fibers over here. So that, yes, upon contraction, the name suggests it's going to pronate, the forearm. But we say that we have Pronator Teres, which, of course, you can see what's over here. But the principal, okay, pronator of the forearm is actually the Pronator quadratus muscle. That one, yes, of course, is also supplied by, of course, the median nerve. So that is, these are the things that we are actually saying. That, yes, these ones, yes, so pronation done by, yes, Pronator Teres muscle, yes, as well as Pronator quadratus muscle. But later on, we'll get to know that, yes, this, brachio radialis muscle, which will be in the posterior compartment of the forearm, although some books want to bring it in the anterior compartment of the forearm, but that one, yes, is not having a common origin from, of course, the medial epicondyle. Neither is it supplied by, of course, either median nerve or ulnar nerve, but rather by radial nerve. So that is what we call pronator quadratus muscle. So yes, doing some surface anatomy so that we can see those kind of superficial flexors. Yes, I said that from the ulnar aspect, yes, so the ulnar aspect is related to the little finger. So over there, upon contraction, okay, if you make a fist, okay, then we can see it. Now, this is flexor carpi, ulnaris. By way of surface anatomy, you can, appreciate the tendon over here, tendon of flexor carpi ulnaris. Then, if I go, toward the middle aspect, yes, I'm going to find a tendon of what we call Palmaris longus. Then even more lateral to it, yes, I'm going to find what we call flexor carpi radialis. Okay, going to these that kind of basis of what we call the second and third metacarpals. But I told you that if I cut this Palmaris longus and reflect it deep to it, I'm going to find what you call flexor digitorum superficialis. So you can see the tendon, okay, being a bit medial to, of course, the tendon of Palmaris longus is what you call flexor digitorum superficialis. One of those intermediate muscles. But of course, some books also want to classify it under the deep muscle. So what have we said? Yes, what we've said is that, yes, the medial epicondyle is the common flexor origin. So the tendons of these, flexors, superficial flexors actually, will be taking origin from here. But not all the muscles anyway. Yes, as you go more deeper, then they will be taking origin from a much distal position. Okay, so yes, we've seen the superficial muscles. Yes, one of them is Pronator Teres. We've also seen, flexor carpi, ulnaris. Okay, then we've also seen flexor carpi ulnaris actually going to the base of what you call the fifth metacarpal, apart from attaching to hook of hamate, and then of course pisiform bone developing within it. Palmaris longus, yes, is also coming from the common flexor origin, but at the end of the day, beyond the flexor retinaculum, will give us the palmar aponeurosis. Then, of course, we also said we are going to have flexor carpi radialis. Okay, flexor carpi radialis, and flexor carpi radialis is going to the base of what we call the fifth metacarpal. Okay, and then yes, if I cut and reflect flexor digitorum, Palmaris longus, then I'm going to find deep to it. I'm going to find what we call flexor digitorum superficialis. Okay, having two heads. Yes, it's going to have what we call the humeral head coming from the common flexor origin medial epicondyle, and then coming from anterior oblique line of the radial bone, okay, being the radial head. So that's what we call flexor digitorum superficialis. Okay, inserting at what we call the basis, the tendons splitting into four, okay, to insert onto the base of the medial four digates. Okay, but they split to give passage for the deeper muscle, which is flexor digitorum profundus, which takes origin from the lower aspect of the anterior shaft of what we call the ulna, okay, all the way this way. So that, yes, while flexor digitorum superficialis is helping in what we call flexion at the proximal interphalangeal joint of these medial four digates, flexor digitorum profundus is helping in flexion, okay, of these digates at the distal interphalangeal joint. Then even taking origin from what we call the anterior surface of what we call the radius, okay, going to this base of the distal phalanx of this thumb, is what we call flexor pollicis longus. Flexor pollicis longus, helping to, of course, flex, okay, this thumb pollex. And then, of course, I said the deepest muscle will be taking origin from a much distal position, and that is what you call from the anterior aspect, okay, or the distal 1/4 of the anterior aspect of the ulna towards, the distal 1/4 of what you call the radius, and that is what you call pronator quadratus. Pronator quadratus. That's the deepest, muscle that you are going to find in the anterior compartment of the forearm. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you find this helpful. In future, I'll be looking at what we call the extensor compartment, of the forearm. Thank you very much, and may God richly bless you.